Vital Signs offers natural and nutritional ways of optimizing our health. Brandon, it's been a while. It's always good to see you. What are we talking about today?
Today, Don, I want to talk about ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Very common. It seems like everyone you know, everyone you meet has a child who's dealing with this kind of condition. And the kind of, often medication is the first path of treatment for these children. And I spoke to a psychiatrist, a child psychiatrist, who said that's not always the best way to go about things. And he's a celebrity psychiatrist. I'm sure many of our viewers have probably heard of him, Dr. Daniel Amen. He's treated people like the Kardashians, and he does these brain scans where he's looking at the brain to see what kind of activity is taking place when they're using different substances like marijuana or coffee or alcohol. So he's rare in that he's actually looking at what goes on inside the brain. And so I wanted to know from his perspective, what do we do aside from medication? What can be done in a natural way to help kids who may be suffering with an attention deficit?
For the last 33 years, we've been looking at the brain, and I have 30,000 people who have ADD or ADHD of one form or another. And the big lesson early on is it's not one thing. A lot of people are diagnosed with it. Some get better with typical ADHD medications, but many people, those medications actually make them worse. And so we have to stop thinking of psychiatric disorders as single or simple disorders like ADHD or depression or OCD or post-traumatic stress disorder. They all have multiple types. And I actually wrote a book about ADD called Healing ADD, See and Heal the 7 different types. And so stimulants like Adderall or Ritalin help 2 of the 7 types, but they can make 5 of the 7 types worse. And so the hallmark symptoms, what we usually see in our practice, short attention span, but not for everything. It's short attention span for regular, routine, everyday things, schoolwork, homework, paperwork, chores. The things they love, they can pay attention just fine.
Like video games, I imagine.
Like video
Often.
games, which are a dopamine dump. So Adderall works by increasing the availability of dopamine. That's how video games work. That's how social media works. It's how drugs work. And also distractibility, disorganization, procrastination. They don't do things until someone's mad at them to get it done. And impulse control issues. And ADHD is not a disorder of the moment, right? All of us have a little bit in us, especially when we didn't sleep well or were overwhelmed.
And he was talking about medication, and I just found that point a bit interesting. Maybe you'd like to elaborate on that.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to hear from a child psychiatrist that medication isn't always the answer. And the unique thing about Dr. Amen, he'll actually speak about his family and tell the story of his daughter who has ADHD. And medication in her case has been a godsend, he says, but if she has too much, if she's given more than she's due, it will completely flatten her out. And so medication will have a different impact on people depending on what kind of ADHD they have. And he's talking about 7 different types. I don't know if the average psychiatrist is aware of these different types that Dr. Amen identifies. So if parents want to look further into that, they might consider looking up his book, looking him up online, and looking at the kind of resources that he's putting out.
Okay, and I do believe you brought with you another clip. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, this is an incredibly simple way of managing ADHD to some degree. It's one of the natural solutions that Dr. Amen identifies, and it has to do with sleep. You know, we all know if we don't sleep enough, it's going to affect our attention. And it turns out often kids are getting diagnosed with ADHD, and the parents find out it's actually because they're waking up or they're doing things at nighttime that they shouldn't be doing. So this is what he's talking about here.
Well, when you sleep, your brain cleans and washes itself. And if you don't get enough sleep, so 7.5 hours for adults, then trash builds up, and it's much harder to focus. I know when I cross time zones, or I try never to take a red eye, but if I do, I'm not making a big decision the next day because I'm not going to be thinking as well as when I get great sleep. When you don't sleep well, it actually turns off 700 health promoting genes in your body, which is a very bad thing. And you won't have good blood flow to your brain. So sleep is absolutely essential, which means you have to take your children's gadgets from them. Do not let them have devices in their bedrooms because they were made to be addictive. I believe purposefully made for mind share. They want as much of your child's mind and your mind as possible. And so at night, it's critical to turn them off. I can't tell you the number of patients I have where the parents think the child has ADD, but when we figure it out, they don't really have ADD. They're sleep deprived because they've been playing with their devices in the middle of the night.
You know, I'm so guilty of that, using devices before I go to bed. And from personal experience, it does actually impact your ability to sleep and how deeply you sleep.
Yeah, these things are incredibly stimulating, and they're designed to be that way because something else Dr. Raymond talks about in this full interview, we'll leave the link at the end of this, is the kind of dopamine effect that the using devices has. And it's akin to using drugs. You know, if they're designed with all these bells and whistles, the bright lights, the sounds, to stimulate the feel-good chemical in the brain and to give that kind of almost like an opiate effect. And even as adults, like you, I mean, we struggle with the temptation of these things. So you imagine it's not easy for children to ignore that blissful device that's lying next to them when they're supposed to be sleeping.
Yeah, and sometimes if you look at it too much, you actually dream about the thing that you were looking at right before you go to sleep. And if it's not like, you know, wholesome content,
right,
you might be dreaming about, you know, these bad things, and you can't really sleep because sometimes it's a nightmare and you're terrified and you don't get a good night's sleep. Well, thank you for bringing this to our attention. Thank you for speaking about it. Pleasure to have you.
Always, Don. Thank you.